The sun was just rising when Amir pushed his small fishing boat into the open morning sea, and the waves were calm enough to make him feel hopeful for a better day ahead because he needed a good catch to take home to his family. Amir was a simple fisherman who worked hard every day and never asked for anything more than enough fish to keep his family safe and fed. Life in his village was quiet, but full of struggles, and every trip to the sea was a test of patience and courage. The sea was his friend, and at the same time his challenge because some days it gave him plenty, and on others it kept everything hidden from him. As his boat moved away from the shore, Amir breathed in the cool air, and felt a sense of peace since fishing had always been something that cleared his mind, even when the world felt heavy. He cast his net and waited as he always did, but something strange felt different in the air around him, as if the sea wanted to show him something unusual today. Time passed slowly, and the sky remained clear, yet Amir could not shake the sense that something was calling him forward. He noticed how the wind seemed too quiet, as if it held its breath, and how the water around his boat carried a soft vibration that made his skin prickle. Amir had grown up on the sea, so he trusted his instincts, and right now they told him that something unexpected was waiting ahead. He lifted his net, which came up disappointingly light, and decided to go a little farther out than he usually dared. He hoped for better luck, but deep inside he knew this feeling was not about fish at all. The sea around him looked normal, yet carried a strange pull that made him keep moving forward, even when he tried to convince himself to turn back. As he sailed on, he saw something dark far on the horizon. At first he thought it was a cloud floating low above the water, but clouds did not stay perfectly still, and they did not have sharp edges. Amir narrowed his eyes trying to understand the shape, and every second made his heart beat faster. The object was huge, and the more he moved toward it, the larger it became, until he began to feel small inside his little wooden boat. He thought of turning back, but his curiosity was stronger than his fear because he had never seen anything like this in his whole life. The shape did not look like another fishing boat or any ship he knew. It stood tall and heavy, as if rising from the water itself, and it drifted without a sound, which made it even more mysterious. When Amir came closer, he finally saw its true size, and his breath caught in his chest because before him was a giant aircraft carrier floating alone with no crew, no noise, no sign of human presence. The ship was massive, bigger than anything he had imagined, and its deck stretched wider than a field. The hull was steel gray and carried marks of weather and long months or maybe years at sea. Parts of it looked worn while others looked almost new, which confused Amir even more. He wondered how such a powerful ship could be left adrift without a single person on board. He searched the sides for movement or signals, but everything remained silent. Even the usual sound of machines or radios was missing. It was as if time had stopped on this ship. Amir slowly circled around the huge structure in his small boat, feeling smaller and smaller with each passing moment. He had no idea what to do, but something inside him urged him to check if anyone might be trapped or hurt inside. His heart raced as he found a metal ladder that hung close to the water. He stared at it for a long moment, because climbing up meant stepping into a world he did not understand. But leaving without checking felt wrong, and he had always been a man who helped others when he could. With a deep breath, he held the cold metal, and began to climb despite the fear tightening his chest. When he reached the deck, he felt like he had entered another place entirely. The open space spread far in every direction, and equipment stood still as if frozen. Chains rattled lightly in the wind, and empty spots showed where planes once sat ready for action. Now everything was quiet and lifeless. Amir walked slowly because every sound of his footsteps echoed in the stillness. He felt as if he had entered a forgotten kingdom built by people far more powerful than him. He could not understand how such a mighty ship could be left alone without supervision or guards. Then he noticed something that stopped him in his tracks. A faint line of footprints stretched across the dusty deck, leading toward a door near the command tower. Amir stared at them because they were fresh enough to show that someone had been here recently. This discovery made his fear grow, but also gave him a strange hope because maybe someone on the ship could tell him what happened. He followed the footprints carefully, his hand resting on the railing as he approached the door. The metal felt cold and heavy when he pushed it open, and a dim light blinked from a control panel inside the room. It was the only thing in the entire ship that seemed alive. The room smelled of old metal and still air. Amir looked around but found no person, and the blinking panel caught his attention. He stepped closer and the screen lit up with strange terms and maps. Amir knew nothing about military symbols, but he understood one word that flashed again and again, and that word was warning. His heart tightened because this meant something serious had happened, or was still happening. He felt like he had walked into a place he was never meant to see. Before he could decide what to do next, he heard a soft sound behind him, like something shifting in the corridor. Amir turned slowly, unsure of what waited for him, and in that moment his life changed forever, because whatever he did next would shock people far beyond his small village and his simple world. Amir stood completely still as the soft sound from the corridor echoed again, and his mind raced to understand who or what could be on the giant ship with him, because he had seen fresh footprints, yet no person had answered his calls, and now the room felt tighter, as if the air itself was warning him to move with care. He turned his head slowly, and stepped back from the blinking screen, trying to listen more closely to the shifting noise in the passage behind him. His heart beat fast and heavy, but he did not run because something stronger than fear held him in place. He wanted to know the truth of this strange ship and why it floated empty in the open sea. He took a careful step toward the doorway, and the floor beneath him gave a soft metallic creak that carried down the dark hall like a whisper. The corridor stretched long and silent, with only dim emergency lights glowing weakly on the floor, as if the ship had been sleeping for a long time. Amir moved forward with steady steps, placing each foot down with care because the silence around him felt like it could break at any moment. He examined every shadow, wondering whether another person was hiding, or whether something else had caused the strange footprints he had seen. The air was cooler inside the ship, and even though Amir had no training in such places, he could sense that something about the ship was not normal. It felt as if it had been left in a rush, yet still carried signs of movement and activity. He reached a corner where the corridor turned sharply, and paused again, listening for any sound that might reveal who was walking earlier. Then he heard it clearly, this time a small cough so soft it almost blended into the metal walls. Amir stepped closer and called out in a calm voice, asking if anyone needed help because he did not want to scare whoever was there. The coughing sound stopped suddenly, and Amir wondered if the person was too scared to speak. He placed his hand on the wall for support, and moved into the next section of the corridor, where a faint light glowed from under a half-open door. The glow came from a small compartment that looked like a supply room filled with scattered equipment and boxes. Amir hesitated before entering, but his sense of responsibility pushed him forward. Inside the room, he saw movement behind a set of crates, and when he approached slowly, a young man stepped out with trembling hands raised halfway, as if unsure whether he should trust Amir or hide again. The young man looked weak, exhausted, and frightened, but not dangerous. His clothes were dirty and torn in places, and his face showed clear signs of sleeplessness. He stared at Amir with wide eyes and asked in a shaky voice who he was and how he found the ship. Amir gently explained that he was just a fisherman who came across the drifting carrier while searching for fish, and that he had climbed aboard only to check if anyone needed help. The young man listened carefully, still breathing hard, and his shoulders lowered slightly as he realized Amir was not a threat. He introduced himself as Rami, a junior technician who had been on the ship when something went terribly wrong. Amir asked him what happened and why the whole ship was empty, but Rami lowered his eyes and said the answer was not simple. Rami walked toward a metal bench and sat down, holding his head with both hands as he tried to gather his thoughts. He told Amir that the ship had been part of a secret mission, and something unexpected had shut down most of its systems, leaving the crew confused and scared. There had been a sudden command for evacuation, but the order had come so quickly that many were unsure why they had to leave. Rami had been trapped in a lower section when the evacuation alarms blared, and by the time he reached the deck, the last rescue boat had already left, and the ship was drifting with no power and no way to communicate. Amir listened carefully, trying to imagine the fear the young man must have felt as he watched everyone leave without him. Rami said he had survived on emergency rations, but the food was almost gone and the lights were failing, which was why he stayed hidden, hoping someone might find the ship before everything shut down completely. Amir felt sympathy for him and placed a hand on his shoulder, telling him that he was no longer alone and that they would find a way to get help. Rami looked up with tired eyes and nodded slowly, because having another human near him brought comfort that he had not felt for days. Amir asked him if the warnings on the screen were still active and if they were in danger, but Rami said he did not know the full details. He believed the warning might be related to a malfunction in the engine systems or something deeper inside the ship. He explained that the aircraft carrier was built with complex machinery far beyond anything ordinary fixes could solve, and if something inside was failing it could be serious. Amir did not understand the technical parts, but he knew they had to move with caution and find out more. Rami stood up and led Amir through another series of hallways toward the control center, hoping the system might still hold some information that could guide them. As they walked, Amir noticed large rooms filled with machinery, control panels, and equipment, all silent as if frozen in time. Rami explained that without full power the carrier could not move, and without communication systems active no one outside would even know it was still afloat. They reached the command center, and Rami opened the heavy door using a manual lever since the automatic system had failed. Inside, the room screens were dark, except for one that blinked weakly, showing the same warning that Amir had seen earlier. Rami approached the screen and typed a few commands, hoping to access more details, but the display flickered and refused to reveal anything more. Amir asked if the ship could sink, but Rami shook his head and said the hull was strong and stable. The real danger was something else, something hidden deeper in the ship that he had not been able to reach. Amir suggested that they check the lower levels together now that he was here to help. Rami hesitated because those areas were dark, narrow, and flooded in some parts, but he knew Amir was right. If they wanted to survive, they had to understand what caused the ship to shut down. They prepared themselves with flashlights and opened the hatch that led to the lower decks. Cold air rushed out, carrying the smell of metal and seawater. Amir felt a chill run through him, but he kept moving because he knew a bigger truth waited below. As they descended the metal stairs, they heard faint sounds like water dripping and distant machines trying to start but failing. The darkness grew thicker with every step, and their flashlight beams cut through the black air, showing pipes, wires, and narrow passages. Rami examined every panel they passed, and Amir watched closely, trying to keep track of the path so they would not get lost. The feeling of mystery grew stronger, and Amir felt a new determination rising in him because he could sense that whatever they found here would change everything for both of them. What they discovered next would shake Amir far more than finding the carrier itself, and it would reveal a truth that no one expected. Amir followed Rami down the narrow metal stairs, and each step echoed softly through the hollow passages of the abandoned aircraft carrier. The deeper they moved, the colder the air became, and Amir felt the change in temperature, like a quiet warning that something powerful and hidden waited in the depths of the ship. The walls on both sides were covered in pipes and cables, and many were marked with faded labels that Amir could not understand. Rami walked ahead, holding the flashlight steady, while Amir stayed close behind, trying not to step on loose metal pieces that scattered the floor. The ship felt alive in a strange way, as if it breathed slowly through the cold air that moved around them. Amir knew he should be afraid, but curiosity pushed him forward because he wanted to understand why such a massive ship had been abandoned and what danger it carried inside. They reached a long passage that sloped downward, and the beam of the flashlight revealed a sign with warning symbols carved deeply into the metal. Rami paused for a moment and explained that beyond this point were the core systems that kept the ship alive, and if anything had gone wrong here it could explain the strange shutdown the ship had suffered. Amir nodded slowly and followed Rami as they moved forward. The floor beneath them felt uneven, as if the ship had taken heavy damage at some point. Drips of water fell from the pipes above them and landed with soft taps that echoed through the dark hall. The air smelled sharper now, mixed with oil and something electric, and Amir sensed that they were approaching a place that held the answers they needed. The hallway opened into a wide chamber filled with tall metal structures and glowing panels that flickered weakly like fading lanterns. Rami raised the flashlight and pointed toward a huge machine at the center of the room. He explained that this was the primary power core of the carrier, and without it the ship could not move, communicate, or support any of its systems. Amir looked around with wide eyes because the machine was larger than any engine he had ever seen. Pipes snaked across the walls connecting to tanks and control units, and many of them showed strange burn marks as if something extreme had passed through them. Rami moved closer and touched the side of the machine with careful hands, as if afraid it might react. Rami explained that the power core was supposed to be stable under all conditions, but according to the signs he was seeing it had suffered a sudden overload. Amir asked him what could cause such a thing since he did not understand machines of this size. Rami answered that an overload this strong could come from a sudden spike in energy far beyond what the ship normally handled. He also said that such a spike could not happen on its own, and that it must have been triggered by some external interference or a serious mistake from someone on the ship. Amir listened carefully, trying to piece the situation together. If the crew had evacuated quickly, it might mean they knew something dangerous was happening, and they had been ordered to leave before the power core failed. Rami walked around the machine checking its panels, while Amir inspected the surrounding area. He noticed a large metal door on the far side of the chamber, and a faint glow seeping from beneath it. He pointed it out to Rami, who immediately grew tense. Rami said that door led to a restricted research bay used for testing advanced equipment. Amir asked if anyone from the crew might still be inside, but Rami shook his head, saying the door could only open from the control center unless something had forced it open. Amir approached the door carefully and placed his ear against the cold metal. He heard a faint rhythmic sound that reminded him of a heartbeat, but slower and heavier, like a giant resting in a deep sleep. Rami joined him and examined the lock panel. It was damaged, as if someone tried to force the door shut instead of open. This confused both of them because it meant the crew had tried to lock something inside the research bay before they evacuated. Rami warned Amir not to touch anything until they understood more, but Amir said they could not ignore the glow or the strange sound because whatever was inside might be the reason the ship had become silent. Rami hesitated but finally nodded because he knew Amir was right. They needed to know what the crew tried to contain before making any plan for escape. Rami attempted to override the damaged lock using a manual release switch. The lights flickered when he pulled the lever, and a loud metallic groan echoed through the chamber as the door slowly slid open, leaving a narrow gap just wide enough for them to enter. The glow from inside filled the room with a pale light that made Amir feel uneasy. He stepped inside with Rami behind him, and they found themselves in a smaller chamber filled with strange equipment and crates labeled with unreadable symbols. The glow came from a large cylindrical container in the center of the room, resting on a reinforced platform. The container pulsed softly with a steady rhythm, and Amir realized that the sound he heard earlier came from this object. The surface of the container looked smooth yet alive, and every pulse of light seemed to breathe through the room. Rami stared at it with wide eyes filled with confusion and fear. He explained that he had never seen this device before, and that it did not belong to the standard equipment of any aircraft carrier. Amir took a slow step closer and felt a wave of warm air sweep past him with each pulse of the container. It felt almost like standing near a living creature. Rami examined the controls on the base of the device and found that its power supply was extremely unstable. He said that this unknown device might have triggered the overload that shut down the ship. Amir asked him what it was used for, but Rami could not answer. He said it might be some kind of experimental energy source or something far more advanced because the readings on the panel made no sense to him. Amir watched the gentle glow and wondered why the crew had locked it inside the chamber instead of shutting it down. Then he noticed something carved on the floor near the container, as if someone had scratched a final message before escaping. The words read, "Do not move it," and the message sent a shiver through both of them. Rami said the crew must have realized the device was unstable, and they trapped it in the chamber to stop it from harming the rest of the ship. Amir asked if the device could explode or cause another power surge, but Rami did not know for sure. He said that the best choice might be to leave the device untouched and search for a way to contact help because they could not risk tampering with something beyond their understanding. As they stepped back from the container, the lights in the room flickered again, but this time it was stronger, and the pulse of the device grew louder as if reacting to their presence. Amir felt the metal floor vibrate under his feet, and he pulled Rami toward the exit. They hurried back to the main chamber and closed the door behind them. The vibration slowly faded, but the warning feeling in Amir's heart stayed sharp and heavy. Rami said they needed to go to the communication bay because if the ship still had any surviving system, they might be able to send a signal to someone outside. Amir nodded because he knew the mystery was larger than anything he had imagined, and they had found something the world was not prepared to see. What awaited them next would push them into a choice that neither of them expected, and the truth would shake everyone who heard it. Amir and Rami hurried away from the lower deck with the echo of the strange device still ringing in their minds, and neither of them spoke for a long moment because the weight of what they had seen pressed heavily on their thoughts. The narrow corridors of the aircraft carrier felt different now, as if the ship itself understood that its deepest secret had been uncovered. The dim lights flickered above them, and the cold air carried a faint hum that was not present before, which made Amir feel that the device was becoming more unstable. Rami kept glancing behind him, as if expecting the glow from the container to follow them up the stairs, but nothing came except the echo of their footsteps. When they reached the upper decks, Rami leaned against the wall to catch his breath, and said they had little time left because the device was reacting too strongly and might trigger another surge that the ship would not survive. Amir placed a hand on Rami's shoulder and told him they needed to stay calm because there had to be a way to call for help and warn others about what was hidden inside the ship. Rami nodded and pushed himself forward, guiding Amir toward the communication bay located near the command tower. As they moved through the spacious deck, Amir looked at the vast empty sea around them and felt the isolation stronger than ever. A lone fisherman and a stranded technician were the only people standing on a vessel meant for hundreds of trained crew members. The silence stretched across the water like a wide blanket, and the stillness made Amir wonder how many days the ship had drifted without anyone noticing. When they reached the communication bay, Rami quickly unlocked the door and stepped inside, hoping that at least one emergency system might still work. The room was filled with screens, panels, and radio units, many of which were dark and lifeless. Rami rushed to the main console and began testing different switches while Amir stood nearby watching every movement with hope. The first few attempts failed, and the radio only produced a weak crackle that vanished instantly. Rami tried another sequence of commands, and one of the screens lit up faintly, showing a broken signal bar that moved slightly before dropping back to nothing. Amir felt frustration growing, but he did not let it show. He reminded Rami that even a small chance was better than none. Rami took a deep breath and tried again, focusing on a manual override system he had learned during training. This time the radio produced a faint tone that slowly grew clearer, and Amir felt his heart lift as the static softened into something that sounded like a real channel trying to connect. Rami leaned close to the microphone and spoke with a steady voice, saying that an emergency situation existed on board a drifting aircraft carrier and they needed immediate assistance. For several seconds there was no reply, and the room felt painfully quiet. Then a faint voice crackled through the speaker, asking for identification. Rami quickly explained that he had been stranded on the ship after a sudden evacuation, and that he was not alone because a fisherman had discovered the ship and climbed aboard to help. The voice on the radio asked for more details, and Rami described the unstable device locked in the lower deck and the complete shutdown of the ship's systems. As he spoke, the tone of the responder shifted from confusion to urgency, and they said a rescue team would be dispatched immediately, but Amir and Rami needed to stay above deck and avoid the lower sections at all cost. Amir felt relief wash over him because finally someone outside knew their situation and help was on the way. But Rami still looked worried. He said that the device might not hold steady long enough for a rescue team to reach them because its pulses were growing stronger by the minute. Amir tried to reassure him, but even he felt the vibration under his feet beginning to return. Suddenly the entire ship trembled for a brief moment, and a deep hum echoed from below, as if the device was awakening again. The lights flickered and the metal walls seemed to vibrate with a warning. Rami said they needed to move to the open deck now because staying inside the ship was too dangerous. Amir agreed, and they rushed out of the communication bay, heading toward the safest open area near the bow. The wind outside was stronger now, and carried a strange energy that Amir had never felt before, as if the sea itself sensed the danger beneath the ship. He looked over the railing and saw bubbles rising in the water along the hull. Rami explained that the device might be releasing heat or energy that was affecting the water around them. Amir felt his stomach tighten because he realized they were standing on top of something that could be more powerful than any machine he had ever known. He asked Rami what would happen if the device reached full instability, but Rami only shook his head because he had no answer. He said that whatever the device was, it did not belong on a ship like this, and it certainly did not belong in the sea. Minutes passed slowly, and the tremors continued in short bursts. Amir looked toward the horizon, hoping to see the rescue team, but there was no sign of another ship yet. Rami checked the emergency flare gun mounted near the rail and handed it to Amir, saying they might need it to signal the rescuers when they arrived. Amir gripped the flare tightly and kept scanning the waves. Then something unexpected happened. The humming beneath the ship stopped completely, and the vibrations faded into silence. Rami's eyes widened, because this sudden stillness was not a good sign. He said the device might be entering a stage where it was either stabilizing or preparing for something far worse. Amir listened to the silence and felt his heart pound, because silence after so much noise felt unnatural. Suddenly, a loud metallic snap echoed from deep inside the ship, and a beam of pale light shot upward from a narrow gap near the deck, as if the device had forced its energy through the ship's layers. The light was not bright enough to blind them, but strong enough to make the steel glow faintly. Amir stepped back and shielded his face while Rami shouted that they needed to move farther away from the center of the ship. They rushed toward the front section where the deck was wide and clear. The pale glow faded within moments, but the memory of it stayed sharp in their minds. Amir asked Rami what the crew had been trying to contain, and Rami said he was afraid the device might not be a simple machine, but something far beyond human understanding. Before they could speak further, a distant sound came from the horizon, the powerful roar of engines cutting across the sea. Amir pointed excitedly as two rescue helicopters approached the carrier, their blades slicing the air with speed and force. Rami waved both arms and Amir fired the emergency flare, which burst into the sky with a bright trail. The helicopters shifted course and moved directly toward them, lowering rescue lines as they hovered above the deck. One of the rescuers shouted for them to climb quickly because the ship was unstable and could not be approached for long. Amir helped Rami grab the first rope and watched as he was lifted safely into the helicopter. Then Amir grabbed the second rope and climbed steadily as the deck beneath him shook again with a deep rumble. As Amir was lifted into the air, the aircraft carrier below him trembled, and a faint light pulsed again from its center. The rescuers moved the helicopter away at full speed, and Amir looked down one last time at the massive ship that had held so many secrets. Moments later, a deep ripple spread across the sea, as the device released a final wave of energy that rolled through the water without harming the helicopter, but leaving the ship glowing softly before returning to silence. The rescuers stared in disbelief because none of them had ever seen anything like it. When Amir and Rami reached the shore, they were surrounded by officials, scientists, and military leaders who asked them countless questions about what they found. The world wanted answers, but Amir had only one truth to share: that he was just a simple fisherman who saw something strange on the horizon and chose to help someone in need. People were shocked by his courage, and the story spread quickly across the region. Some called him a hero, and others called him the luckiest fisherman in the world, but Amir said he only did what he felt was right. The drifting aircraft carrier was later secured by a special team and taken away for further study, but the device inside remained a subject of mystery. Amir returned to his village quietly and continued fishing, but his life was never the same. Every time he looked at the sea, he remembered the silent giant ship, the young technician he had saved, and the strange pulsing device hidden below the deck. And he knew that his simple choice to climb aboard had changed far more than just his own life, because sometimes an ordinary person is the one who uncovers extraordinary truths.